Welcome to Lawyerpreneur, where we discuss the alternate paths that allow lawyers to engage their entrepreneurial spirits, connect their creativity to their careers, and distinguish themselves from others. I'm your host, Jeremy Richter. This episode is brought to you by ALPS, Legal Malpractice Insurance Made Easy. As the largest direct writer of lawyers' malpractice insurance, ALPS provides outstanding insurance products, claims handling by licensed attorneys with private practice backgrounds, and risk management resources to help your firm be successful. ALPS understands that being a lawyer is hard, and they want to help make it a bit easier. Their online application takes as little as 20 minutes to complete, so you can get back to what really matters. To find out more, visit alpsinsurance.com. Now, on to the interview. My guest today is Tripp Watson. He is the owner of the Watson Law Firm in Birmingham, Alabama. His firm provides business consulting and legal services to entrepreneurs. Tripp, welcome to Lawyerpreneur.
Morning, Jeremy.
Hey. All right. We're going to just jump right into it here. You graduated law school in 2010 during the dark heart of the Great Recession for law firms. So let's start with that experience, because I think it probably sets the tone for how your business has developed out of it.
Yeah, so I came to law kind of a little bit different than a lot of folks do. First lawyer in my family. All my close family had all been business owners, business managers, and my father had started his own business. Even my grandmother, I think probably back in the 60s, had started her own business. And so that was kind of the background that I came through. So when I went to law school, I was one of those folks that graduated college and didn't really know what I was going to do. And so I just went to law school because that's what everybody told you to do. And so I went to law school and realized I liked the practice of law. There were certain components I liked about it, but I always intended to go and start my own business or do something like that. And my cousin had started his own business when he was 27. So when I graduated law school, it was 2010, an absolute worst part of the market, because not only did you have the crash in 2008, but you had all the folks that had graduated in 2008 and 2009 that were still hurting for jobs, that were either unemployed or underemployed, that I was having to compete against. And I sent out over 130 resumes, got one interview. And that one interview was, we're not even really hiring. We're just new to the market and trying to get our name out there. And I was like, this is an awful way to get your name out there. And so I'd always kind of planned on starting my own firm a couple of years down the line and just kind of speeded up the timetable. So I passed the bar on a Thursday and opened up my practice on the following Monday. All
right. Well, how did that go?
I mean, touch and go. When I first started out, I teach I do a guest appearance at my old alma mater and on legal tech. And when I first started out, I tried to do too much. Tried to set up my own server and do all that kind of stuff. So I spent an overwhelming amount of my time on infrastructure and just administrative stuff instead of actually practicing. And that early on, it was pretty easy to do that because I had no work coming in. But I quickly realized that was not good at that. And so I needed to stop that and actually start working on the legal stuff. So I've always kind of maintained a interest in it, but realized pretty early on that that's lost money for me.
All right. So one of the things that I know you did early on was that you had a business coach and got into being coached and mentored, which I think a lot of lawyers are adverse to doing because they think, well, I'm a good lawyer, so I must be a good business person too.
Yeah. Was
that beneficial to you, and how did that work for you?
Absolutely. So I graduated law school and did my MBA as well. So I did a joint JD MBA. Anybody that's done the MBA program is very familiar that an MBA teaches you how to manage a Fortune 500 company. It does not tell you how to run a very small company or to get one off the ground. It tells you how to analyze, 5 years of financial records. It doesn't really help you when your financial record history is 5 days. So that was one of the big issues that I ran into, was that I had this idea. I knew how to manage things that were existing and how to improve them even based upon my MBA, but had no idea how to start. I also had no idea how to practice law, because anybody that's graduated from law school knows that they don't actually teach you how to practice law. So I came out realizing that I had two very impractical skill sets for what I was going into. So thank God the Birmingham Bar had a legal mentoring program that I joined immediately. That was fantastic. I'm still on fantastic terms with my mentor that I met through there. And that was a volunteer situation. And that taught me how to practice law. And so that was great, but it also didn't teach me how to run the legal practice side of things. And law schools, even if they do a law practice management class or something like that, a lot of it's not really geared towards teaching you how to run a law practice. And so I hired John Robbins out of Florida when I first started out, and it was great, because the program that I was in was geared towards specifically starting a law practice. And he had great, fantastic pointers on, hey, here's what to think about when you're getting office space. Here's what to think about when you're getting, practice management systems, real practical things that you just never actually encountered in law school. But thinking strategically about, okay, well, do I look for the dirt cheapest office space? Or if I'm going to be doing, estate planning or something like that, maybe being conveniently located to a retirement home is actually a benefit, and maybe would be willing to pay a premium to be there. So one of the things that I thought about when I started doing those was I worked with a lot of business owners, and a lot of startups in Birmingham were happening downtown in Birmingham, especially around Innovation Depot, which is a startup accelerator and incubator here in Birmingham. And so I was like, I need to be as close as possible to that place. And so we've been working with clients over there for years now, and being a short walk down the street is a big benefit for a lot of our clients that are located in the downtown area.
All right, so you market your firm as the Entrepreneur's Law Firm. How did you decide that those are the clients you want to work with, and that's how you want to structure your business?
The easy answer is they were folks like me. Like I said, I came to law differently than a lot. So I never really expected that I would go into law practice. I thought I would start my own business. And so when I started my own practice, and I beat my cousin by 2 years, by the way, I started it when I was straight out of law school. And so the people that I was working with were people that I knew, the people that I had grown up with. My dad's friend, my family's friends were business owners themselves. I didn't really know any doctors, didn't really know any lawyers, barely even knew any accountants. That's family friends. All of our family friends were folks that had owned businesses, started businesses. And so I knew kind of what made them tick. I knew what excited them. I knew what stressed them out. I knew really kind of what motivated them in a very different way than a lot of other attorneys saw. And so I was like, I can provide unique advice and insight, because, I saw when my father's business had no money and we didn't have enough money to paint the walls. And the primary color of our living room for years was drywall. But I also saw what happened when the companies expanded and went through VC rounds, the stresses that he encountered, the excitement that he felt. And I saw those milestones. So I could talk to somebody, listen, you're going to sell your business, and this is going to happen. And then after you sell the business, there's going to be this gaping hole in your life that you're going to need to fill with something. That's particular insight that a lot of people don't necessarily get from a lot of folks that haven't seen the different steps of a business process. And because those were folks that thought and acted like I did, those were folks that I wanted to work with.
All right, so most people probably don't think of Birmingham as a burgeoning home of startups and entrepreneurs, but it sounds like they might be wrong.
Oh, yeah. Way wrong. A lot of people don't even know Birmingham is an entrepreneurial city by its creation. It was literally a city that was formed by a bunch of guys that got together and said, "Hey, there's everything that we need here to make steel. There's not even a city here. It was like Ellington or something like that. It was a village." And so they were like, "Okay, here's a fantastic area. Let's build this city out of nothing." And so it was one of the very first, planned cities in the country built with an industrial idea. And so the city of Birmingham itself is a fantastic example of entrepreneurship. It was called the Magic City back in the 20s and 30s because of how fast it was growing. And then it's gone through different changes, which is requires some entrepreneurial thinking, because it went from being steel, which had a lot of financial backing, and when the steel industry went away, the financial expertise stuck around, and so banks have been here for years, and then a lot of that built out a lot of technological needs because those banks serve clients all over the country. And so now the technological basis that we have here is very strong as well, simply because that was the next logical step when a lot of the banks moved out of town.
So, as far as your law practice goes, having a niche practice that focus on business owners, did you find that made it more difficult to get started or easier to get a foothold? What was it like for you, just being really focused on who you wanted to serve?
So I struggled with that when I first started out, because, the idea that when you hang your shingle, you've got to basically, the financial stress of being able to needing to take any case that comes in the door. And I realized that I took some bad cases that were outside of my skill set early on just because I needed the money. And I realized pretty quickly that was a bad idea. And I ended up specializing and focusing on entrepreneurship, which for us means business formation and structuring and a lot of intellectual property work. But we also do some of the routine business work, such as collections and contract drafting and review, a lot of the general counsel type stuff that businesses need. And when we got into that, we realized that, I'm a small firm. There were not a lot of small firms that did that type of work, especially with a focus on entrepreneurs. And so what I quickly realized was I started getting referrals from other attorneys that did similar stuff to me, but didn't necessarily do exactly what I was doing. And some of those admittedly were, established attorneys that were like, these guys can't afford me. I'll drop them down the line and maybe I'll let this guy go chase his fee. Some of that happened. Some of it was, legitimately like, I do this kind of work, but not specifically that kind of work. And I realized that the more that I specialized, the less competition I had for other attorneys, because one, they knew I wasn't going to steal a client, because if they were doing an estate plan, we didn't do that. So I wasn't going to steal that client. They could refer that business structuring to me. They could refer, those types of cases to me, and they would still get to keep their client. Their client was benefited by having some expertise in a different area. And so I turned potential competitors into referral sources. And so the niching was critical to our success.
All right. So what are some of the ways that you marketed or branded that were successful and help you getting traction? And how has that evolved as you've been in business for more than 10 years now?
So one of the first things that we did, and I did a lot of networking when I first started out. So one of the good things that Arjan did, and one he preaches on, is thinking about marketing as kind of three big buckets. You've got, networking, PR, and advertising. And networking is, meeting people, glad handing, going and grab lunch and stuff like that. PR is kind of what you do to just advertise your firm through press releases and media relationships. And then you have traditional advertising, which is buying ads and whatnot. So when I first started, I had no money to buy AdWords. Those were super expensive back in, we haven't done AdWords in years, but for a lot of the stuff that I was doing, it was $15 to $20 a click. And so that was just not going to happen. So I did a lot of the other stuff. I, made some friends that worked at the local newspapers, started going to grab lunch with a lot of attorneys and other referral sources in town, and started leveraging a lot of those relationships. And so the benefit of a lot of that is that while while it took a lot of time, it didn't cost a lot of money. And so I didn't have money at the first. I had a lot of time. And so I did a lot of networking, joined networking events, and I was a BNI member for years. I lucked out and got a fantastic group that had a bunch of other business owners in there. And that was about the only reason I made money my first year, because those guys, they needed help with their businesses. They were growing real fast. They were real aggressive. And I really kind of lucked out with who I met up with there. And I still do a lot of work with those guys here, 10, 11 years later. And got some good friends out of it too. But as the practice has grown, what we did was focus, and we've always called ourselves the entrepreneur's law firm, which is the idea behind if you're starting a business, if you're an aspiring entrepreneur, we're the folks that you need to reach out to. We didn't advertise as being, the big industrial business law firm or the personal injury law firm or something like that. And that set us apart because my lack of creativity, I called it the Watson firm, and I didn't really have a good brand name that I want to put on it. And if somebody's looking through just a laundry list of law firm names, all they see is a bunch of names that doesn't mean anything to them. But then they see somebody saying, "Oh, well, we're the entrepreneur's law firm." It's like, okay, well then I know that you don't do family law. I know that you don't do estate planning. I know that you don't do personal injury. I know that I'm going to get a little bit different experience here than I would at one of those shops.
All right. So as you added clients and have since added other lawyers to the firm, what are some of the growing pains that you experienced as a business owner?
Scaling. I mean, that's always the big thing. We've got, at this point now, we have, including myself, a total of 4 attorneys and 1 paralegal. We have no other support staff. And so that has been an interesting component because we have, as much as possible, tried to automate what would otherwise be administrative tasks. As a practical matter, a lot of our folks do end up doing a lot of administrative work, and that's one of the stresses that we've encountered, because as much as automation sounds nice, I think there's an old Bill Gates quote that said that automation exponentially multiplies any inefficiency. And so if there's one little hang up in your automation, then it gets perpetuated through every single file that you have. And so that was one issue that we had as we continued to grow, because, I had a certain way that I did things, but then our other attorneys have certain ways that they like to do things, and building in the flexibility to be able to do that. And so, I like to keep just little things. Like I like to keep notes in Microsoft Word. Some of my other attorneys don't like to do that. They like to keep track of stuff on paper, and just managing that was a little bit of a growing pain. Just, okay, well, how are we going to make sure that we keep all this stuff in the file and accessible so that if we need it? Another thing that we did early on was we were decentralized to begin with. So I was talking to Jeremy before we got started. We were in a Regis office suite for years because I didn't need a lot of real estate. Being close to a lot of my clients was a big deal, but I didn't need file cabinets. I didn't need a whole bunch of other stuff like that because we were electronic very early on. And so when COVID came about, for a lot of firms, it completely shut them down because you had to be in the office. You had to have direct access to the server. For us, we had been using, basically cloud-based practice management and file systems since the very beginning. And I'd always made it very clear to my folks, I don't care where you work. If you're more efficient in the office, come into the office. If you're more efficient working in a coffee shop, go to a coffee shop. I don't care where it is. If you can get work done, go there. And so that's always kind of our policy. So when COVID hit, it was basically, I remember the shutdowns came into place on like a Thursday. And for us, it was basically like, all right, well, my paralegal has a desktop. Everybody else had to have a laptop. So she had to go and get her desktop and take it home. But everything else was seamless. We picked it up immediately. And so that was one thing that was a decision that we had made early on, so that COVID really didn't hurt us on that front.
With that system in place of, as long as you're getting your work done, I don't care where you're doing it or when, has that made it easier for you to hire good people who also need flexibility and want the opportunity to work in that kind of situation?
Oh yeah. I mean, anybody that, and I imagine a lot of your listeners are other lawyers. A lot of them probably work at bigger firms. You know, the billable hour pressure, and that's not a light pressure. It's light, especially at big firms. That's a requirement. You know, the idea that you've got to do 1,800, 1,900, 2,000 hours a year, even more than that, in order is not just a condition of your bonus, but a condition of keeping your job. And the problem is that that's great when you're 23 and have no kids. When you start having kids and getting married and life changes, or you start having health problems, pulling 2,000 hours is real tough to do. And so you have really good people that wash out of the big law system almost by design, because that's how you bill your time. That's a revenue model. And so you have folks that wash out that are really good attorneys that don't have a good place to land because the expectations are just too high. And so what we found is that we could end up, we can put very minimal billable hour expectations on our folks and incentivize them to work however much they want to work in order to obtain the money that they want to make. And in some ways, they're a lot like salespeople, where you hit your numbers if you want to hit your numbers, but as long as you're doing the bare minimum, you're going to have a job here. Mm-hmm. And so we have folks that we don't have a set vacation policy. You want to go on vacation, let me know so that we don't schedule a hearing that week. But other than that, take your time off, spend time with your family. If you want to, if you can get your work done and check off the 3 items that you have on your to-do list by 3:00, check out, go pick up your kids after school and go play in the park. That's what I want. I want attorneys that are going to be here for a long period of time, because the investments that we make in our attorneys is large. And so if I milk you and wring you out in 2 years, then I'm losing money. And so I'd rather have somebody stick around for a long period of time and develop some loyalty. And it's a marathon and not a sprint. So if they're never getting to see their kids, never getting to hang out with anybody, then they're not going to be with me for a long time.
Yeah. All right. On your website, under your About Us page, you have a page that outlines in great detail what clients can expect when working with you and your firm. Why is that important to you, to have those expectations set out early on, where they can readily find it before they even have to make a decision about calling you and deciding whether they want to work with you? They know, here's what I can expect from these guys.
So this comes from a personal experience. Anybody that, and Jeremy, you probably know this as much as I do, our generation grew up, we were the very first generation to grow up with the internet. And there was tons of information that you could just crunch and look over and read and whatnot. And I remember the very first time I ever bought a new car, I had gone onto the website, seen every single package, every single option, every single variable that could be, and I had, okay, I want this, I don't want this, I know exactly what I want. And by the time I got onto the lot, I knew more than the sales guy about this particular car. Like, he was like, oh yeah, you can do this and it plugs in by Bluetooth. And I was like, oh no, I've already watched the video to how to pair my phone. Like they provided that much information. And that was a tremendous selling point for me, because there was no opacity to it. I could see exactly, here's the car. We're telling you exactly what it does, what it doesn't do. And that was a big selling point for me, because I was like, okay, these are the big things that I want. It has everything that I want. And that was my buying decision. So by the time I showed up on the lot, I had already made the decision to buy the car. And I didn't have to waste a single minute of a sales guy's time trying to figure out anything. The only thing that was necessary for me was to drive the actual car to make sure it didn't drive like a load of junk. So I wanted the same experience for a lot of my clients. A lot of lawyers are very hesitant about providing certain information to a lot of folks, because you feel like you're kind of giving away something. And practically speaking, the advice that we give, if it's low level legal advice, like, hey, there's a court system and you can file a lawsuit and here's what that's not good use of our time. And so providing that information on the early stage to be like, hey, here's an outline of generally what you should look at here. Then that cuts to the chase and allows us in a consult to get down and really talk about your specific situation. So one of the things that we did was we didn't want to hide the ball and make our clients feel like they were signing some 3 to 4 page retainer agreement on sight unseen. And they felt, some of these situations where, we've got to have certain things in our retainer agreements to protect ourselves as attorneys. But I didn't want my clients to come in and say, just get overwhelmed by this 4-page document, say, I can't read this right now. I can't make a decision right now. So we just put the thing on the website. We're like, here's our terms. Here's what it's like working with us. Here's what to expect. Here's our normal working hours. If you have an emergency, here's what you need to do. Here's what an actual emergency is.
Because y'all might have different ideas of what an emergency is.
Exactly. So, having a clear expectation of what an emergency is, what it looks like, and then how to reach us, what happens if, you get a bill that you just can't pay. We're unique. I have 2 policies that we put in place in very early stages that we've reiterated the entire time, which is if you have a quick phone call, I don't have to open the file or provide any real deep legal insight, but you have a real quick 2 or 3 minute phone call, I'm not going to bill you for that. And the main reason is that I don't want the fear that you're going to get hit with a $25, $30, $50 bill to be the reason that you don't call me when something stupid like that might prevent thousands of dollars in damages long term. So, I get phone calls from clients all the time. I say, hey, I've got a real quick question. I've got a guy that hasn't shown up the last 3 days. Like, what do I need in order to fire him? And it's like, well, you've got, if you've documented it, you can let the guy go. And they won't get billed for that time because that's a relatively simple answer. If it's more complex, we'll bill for that. Obviously, we're still lawyers and track our time. Which brings up the other policy that we implemented, which is we can't guarantee outcomes, but we do a rate guarantee. And so what a lot of our clients do is they're starting their businesses. And so we allow them within the 30 days that the invoice is outstanding, if they feel like we have overbilled them for something, they have the ability to come back and say, okay, well, you worked for 7 hours on this particular deal. I think it was necessary, but I feel like that was a lot of work that went into something that I think was not that important. So we give them the option to go through and just, print the thing off, line item through it, and pay us what you think that we're owed, and we'll call it even. And the reason for that is that our clients, from a financial decision, are much more valuable to us as long-term clients. And so if they're going to get one big invoice that runs them off and they never talk to us again, yeah, it's great. And we made the equivalent of one sale that we'll never get ever again. And they're going to tell all of their friends, oh yeah, he charged me an arm and a leg, and we will never see any of that business. But if the guy comes back and says, listen, I felt like y'all billed me $2,000 on this. Y'all really should only bill me about $800. I'm going ahead and paying you for the $800, but I'd like a credit on the rest. We'll work with them because chances are over time, we're going to make up that $1,200 difference pretty easily.
Are there people who take you up on that?
Oh, yeah. Invoices are supposed to go out this week. So we've got 3 of them that we've got to fix on our side right now. So yeah, it happens all the time.
All right. So one of the things,
and those are all clients that we've worked with for years.
One of the things that I want to talk about today, since this is a show for lawyers who are doing entrepreneurial things, is that aside from your own law practice, you have at least one other business that I know of, maybe more than that. You own a building downtown that you rent out and that sort of thing. So tell me about that business. Tell me why, because sometimes I will get asked, why can't you just be a lawyer? Like you have like these 17 other irons in the fire. Why can't you just do this one thing? Because, it in itself is a full-time job and more. So why can't you just be a lawyer and you have these other things going on?
Well, when I first got into practice, somebody told me that if you ever meet any lawyer that is not an aspiring ex-lawyer, you've probably met a sociopath. So I think anybody that's done this for probably more than a couple of years, especially if you're on the billable hour side, there's a joke that a lot of us have that there's no such thing as an off day. There's just a day you're not billing. So a lot of the motivation that I've always had is that, the inevitable desire to get that mailbox check, whether it exists or not. The idea that, I remember talking to one of my clients years ago, and he had a cell phone tower that was on a piece of property that he never used, but that cell tower lease was just incredibly lucrative. And I was like, that would be nice, because he literally just got a mailbox check once a month for that cell phone tower. And I was like, that sounds like a good idea. So I've always tried to figure out other ways that, I could do that, but also appeal to certain interests that I had. So I've always liked real estate, commercial real estate, kind of weird thing to like about, but I like old buildings. I like the way that cities are laid out. I've always liked that kind of stuff. And so we had the opportunity there, a building sitting vacant downtown, actually used to be occupied by a law firm that had closed down several years ago. And it was the right time. We needed the office space anyway. And so we were like, we'll go ahead and buy this. We can't fill the whole thing with our law firm, but we could potentially get some other tenants and have an opportunity to expand. And it's been fantastic. We've got solid tenants in the building now. And it's a nice little way of offsetting some of the stresses of billing time.
Since it's the Christmas season, can we tell the name of the corporation that you used to purchase the business?
Yes. So the name of the company that owns the building is Nakatomi Trading Company, which we affectionately know the building as Nakatomi Tower.
Which, for anybody who doesn't know, is right out of Die Hard. Which... much heated debate.
The best Christmas movie.
Yeah, much heated debate about whether it's actually a Christmas movie or not. I'm willing to claim it as one. I'm good with that. All right, I think that's a great place for us to end. For people who want to follow you, keep up with what you do, where's a good place to do that?
So you can check us out at our website, trippwatson.com. That's 2 P's, TRIPP, Watson. You can also check us out on social media at The Watson Firm. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. And feel free to reach out to us. We like to interact with other attorneys and other folks that are thinking about getting into the law practice, even folks that are thinking about getting into this type of work. We take all kinds.
Thanks so much for your time. I really enjoyed the conversation.
All right, man. Good to see you.
Too. If you've enjoyed the show, you can support it by rating it on Apple Podcasts or wherever it is you're listening, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. You can also support the show on Patreon at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. Thanks for listening.